Selamat pagi sahabat yang luar biasa. Semoga sehat.
Kamu punya akun gimana?
Susi Pujastuti, Menteri Susi Pujastuti, Susi Pujastuti kan?
Ya.
Dia kan cuma lulusan SD, tapi dia bisa jadi menteri.
Benar.
What do you think? Bisa contoh Menteri Pujastuti bisa. Angel pakai jadi nanti kakak yang dibatas sama penjelasan. Oke, bisa. Aku bisa kan minta Angel Am I audible? Am I audible now or not? Am I sound clear? One, two, three. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So hello everyone. My name is Angelica Mendoza Pacuapero, and today I'm as the first speaker of a government team. Will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay. At this modern era, we believe that everyone wants a job for their life and their future life. There are so many cases that show us that people work really hard to get jobs. They always try to focusing on their potential so that they can get a benefit with their potential. And also, but because of that, many companies appear with a very high standard for people who want to work at the company. And commonly, the most famous standard is a graduate. If people want to get a job and they have to graduate and get a level based on where they at and or what they want to be in the future. And for us as government team, it's such a toxic and a dangerous standard for every people, especially for those who not graduated. So that we want to tell you guys that actually people from non-university graduate team or side can also and need an attention to get jobs or become an employers, even though they are not graduated like the other people. Before I start my argument, for clarification, I would like to clarify and focuses on the university and non-university graduates. So first of all, we have to know that non-university graduates are those people who not graduate in the university. In Indonesia, because it can happen because of the main point or the main reason that the bad academic condition of the family or of themselves, and maybe they had a different or their own dream to not being in the university. Now, let's move on into my argument. Firstly, we believe that non-university graduates are also has their own potential. As what I said before, that academic is the main point for all of the people of the youth who want to get a job as employees, but they can't because of the bad communication. For the bad economic condition is the biggest reason why people cannot go and not get a jobs. And we can just say that all people is not want to be in the university because of their own mind. But there are some cases, there's a lot of people who really want to get jobs and get into the university, but they can't, and actually they have their potential, they may be better than the people who graduate. We can see that there are so many potential for non-graduation. For example, is the local workforce. So local workforce is the activists or activism who just like a course and create a people with their own potential to not always have a standard in base or academic based. And we can see that with local workforce there are so many potential or the hidden potential that can be used in the unemployment. And non-graduation people are always called as an unemployment people. And basically, what is the function of the made of a company? So company, of course, is made to give people a jobs and opportunity to get jobs. And then why they not should take rules or not hire people to the company just because they don't graduate. That is my first argument. The second one is actually, we can see clearly that non-university graduates people it can help people or increasing the level of humans. Many people that graduate is probably already has a mental issue or stress because all of the traits and all of the steps that they have been doing in the university. And for non-graduating people that don't have a very pressure of the university and they can become better the workforce if we can just like course or hone their skills, and then they can become better than usual to work and employees. And with that, we can change the level, and we can just like course or depending the level of people who are not graduate to become more better and become the more qualified people. And they can also give a many contribution for the employees, and now who are always stay with the standard, not just work in the in the company, but they can also work in the company or what they want. And also that with the non-graduation people, it also can give a new innovation from a reality that employees are just need to work in a company with a with the complete and the 1,000 documents, or with all of the tasks that give by the bosses, and if you will stress. But it will give a new, but with the non-graduating people, it will give a new innovation, well, that, like what I said before with the local workforce, it will give a new innovation, and also it will give a change to the people who are not graduating, can also explore their talent as well as the people who not graduate. So from all of the reason, I really proud to propose. Thank you.
Judge, I agree with proposition when they say that everyone wants a job, but there's simply not enough justification, there is not enough of an urgency. What we need from proposition, especially from the second speaker and third speaker, is A, why is the level of education and knowledge of non-university graduate student sufficient and necessary, sufficient and enough, especially in more technical job, let's say engineer or being a doctor. Secondly, why is education that inaccessible in status quo? We also need an explanation from their side, right? And notice, their case about how old people cannot afford this university and how they don't have any time is already out of this debate, because either way in both sides of the house, these old people will simply not get employed anyway because of the perspective that jobs employer have that old people cannot really perform well in these corporations. So this debate should be more on the current generation. So I'll clearly set this debate up under two things. Firstly, what is incentivizing companies to have university, higher university graduate student under our side looks like? Is that A, government will most likely promote it. Government will socialize the importance of having educated and trained human resources in corporation. And then secondly, I think that the manifestation could vary according to the country and the government way of doing it. So this could look like, for some countries, it could be simply in the form of promotion by the government, but in some other country, it might look like giving incentive in terms of rewards like financial aid, so that these companies can really hire, and give good wages towards these employees. But then secondly, what happens to non-university graduates, and this also directly tackled down a lot of their cases from side proposition, is that A, firstly, I just want to clearly mitigate and just neutralize the harm here, is that I want to point out that the number of non-graduate students that exist in the status quo right now are already lowering anyway, right? With the awareness, with the general awareness of the Gen Z, noticing that the importance of education is really that high, I think there's a lot more people actually wanting to go to university. But then secondly is that education is also much more accessible in the current status quo, with how the government is also providing much more scholarship, like ISMA scholarship or BEAM, for example. So this posits that even if these people at the end of the day got unemployed, it is in a really minor cases, it is only on a minority of cases. But secondly, even if that is really the case, that these non-university graduates does not get employed, notice that other smaller businesses, I think, will still hire these non-university graduates. For example, like warung makan or maybe home-owned business will most likely hire these people anyway, because maybe they don't have the capacity to hire university graduates. So if in the instances, especially like corporation wants to hire non-graduate students that are still allowed to under our side of the house, we're not forcing them, we're only incentivizing them. But we think the delta is that under our side of the house, the standard to hiring non-graduate students will be much higher. For example, if you're only a high school graduate in our side, you can still be hired, but you need to have like tons of experience on field, so it is much more than inside proposition. That's the delta. I'm going to bring to argument then. Firstly on urgency, secondly on what we get in our side on the long-term impact. Firstly on urgency, I want to clearly note three things here. Firstly is that I'm just going to start with highlighting the importance of college degree, noticing the delta between high school student and also graduate student. Is that A, university graduates are much more prepared with on-site practice. There's the delta between SMA student and also college student. For example, they go to practicum for maybe doctor, or maybe there's internship for business major, etc., etc. Secondly, even more importantly, these university graduates learn things in a more specific manner, like unlike high school, because in the status quo, In high school, you only learn about religion, maybe about science, even though that's maybe not the specific field that you want to learn about. University teach you in a more specific manner. So sure, the task might be harder, the teacher might be stricter. It is in terms of the environment that pushes you to be better. But then lastly is that college degree is a real life proof that these people are actually that dedicated. They're actually they want to truly work in that sector to the extent that they can learn another 4 years. I think this is another metric for employers to use on the art side of the house. But then notice that P1 case about people getting stressed because they go to college is simply inexclusive, because if people are still going to go to school, people are still going to go to work, then stress and depression will still exist anyway. So this framing on the art side of the house is important because this already posits the delta of college and high school graduate, which P1 completely neglects. But the second issue under this, I want to clearly note to you the role of the government, because notice that this is a policy debate. Proposition did not explain to you what is the role of the government in this debate. A is that they want to promote education and make it more accessible. I think on the art side of the house, it is more likely for the government to make college more accessible. This is likely because when government incentivizes something, they don't just simply say, okay, I want you to hire graduate student. I think they need to implement a policy to ease the financial burden, or else like riot will rise and it's not within the interest and incentive of the government. But then secondly, the role of the government is also that they want to prioritize impact. We think it's better in opposition when we get people who are more ready to actually step in the society. I'm going to extend that later on my second argument. So this means that even if at worst, proposition case is so right, is so correct that high school student can be better in some instances, our independent benefit on accessible of education for especially underprivileged community still runs to this debate. But then lastly, even if in proposition best case scenario, they get skilled non-university graduate at the very best case scenario, which I want to point out is a really minor case. First is that it's extremely hard for for employers to determine the credibility of these people. In opposition, it's much easier through objective measures like the certificate and the SAT scores that is inexclusive. But that is exclusive on our side. But then secondly, I would also argue that these university students are actually more vulnerable compared to non-university students. Because why? A, they have invested their money, they have invested their time compared to these non-university graduate, but they got competed by people who didn't even opt into this. But then secondly, and more importantly, people who are university graduated have less agency in their future career choices. For example, if they decide to opt into engineer degree, they can only be an engineer. So we should ensure that the career path is so much clearer on the other side of the house. So the weight should be on the vulnerability. Because I've already proved to you, Judge, that government will help underprivileged students. So the only reason that exists on their side of the house for people to stay being an non-graduate is that maybe they're lazy or simply they're not motivated. I don't think that's a metric of vulnerability. The most vulnerable people are these university students that don't get employed simply because the government incentivizes people to do otherwise. Before I move on, any point? Then secondly, I'm going to extend on the impact, on the practicality, what happens on the other side of the house. There's two major impacts that you get inside proposition if you propose. A, just a minor extension on my first argument that education is more accessible. I think this is really important for three reasons. A, you get more skilled human resources on the other side of the house, and I think that's just in general better because we have people that understand about progressivity, we have people that understand about more technical issues. But the second is that we have less segregation within society. Like now there's no, there's less number of people that is undergraduate, non-graduate, for example, so there's less segregation and in general stigmatization. But then thirdly is that society becomes progressive because of obviously the first reason. The manifestation of this is that you get long-term economic benefit because these people can open up businesses, these people can contribute to the country, etc., etc. The impact is so marginal, but it's so big basically. Compared to proposition then, they only have people that have like the general knowledge that they learn through high school. There is no specific field knowledge. This is bad because this lowers the motivation of people to dream high, like become an astronaut or become an engineer, because they can still get higher even if they don't pursue this type of degree, right? The manifestation in proposition is really bad because it means that there's going to be less people that opt into difficult field. Two impact then. First is that there's going to be a crowded market on quote-unquote more easier job. So because at the end of the day, it's also going to be harder for you to get a job on their side of the house because of how so many people are actually invested into those sector. But then second, and more importantly, there's just simply no innovation on like harder job. For example, being an engineer, being a doctor, there are less people that's going to be incentivized to opt into those sort of job. But then second thing you get on the other side of the house is that the maximization of companies' growth. This is likely because we promote like healthier competition when companies actually have more accessibility in getting skilled human resources. Companies are also more productive, they can generate more income, which in general just benefit the country because of the economic circulation, etc., etc. So the weighing here should be on impact because this debate again is about policy and whether it's about the government interest. We successfully proved to you by saying A is that there is indeed an urgency and why is it still justified for underprivileged students. We clear our burden on principle, but then secondly we also answer our burden on practical, even from the first speaker, because impact is much major in scale from our side of the house. For all those reasons, negate.
I think all first speaker from the speech. Okay, check. As we know that all humans have the same opportunities to get work and contribute in work life. Even when they are non-university graduates, it doesn't mean that the people who are non-university graduates cannot be greater than people who are university graduates. We can see an example like people who only high school graduates, like who graduates from SMK, they are people who really have potential and choose to focus to their skills and ability. And it makes them have a big possibility and opportunities to become greater than people who are university graduates. As we mentioned before, we believe that all humans and persons have the same opportunity. And we believe too that with higher non-university graduates can minimize the amount of unemployed people in a country. If a company or a country only hire people who are university graduate, then where people with non-university graduate should go. With only hire people who are university graduates also means that they ignore the great ability and potential which can actually increase a country or even the world. And as we've mentioned before too, that with higher non-university people can increase level of human life. No, thank you. We believe this because with only higher people who are university graduates can increase the amount of unemployed people. And all of we know that this is something really harm a company or a country or even the world. For example, about people who non-university graduates can be greater than people who are university graduates, we got Mrs. Susi Pujiasuti, who actually non-university graduates. That she can become a great people who also can manage and influence and even can looking out to a country or the world. The opposite team mentioned that people who university graduates are people who educated, and people who are no thank you, and people who are non-university graduates are people who are uneducated. I think this is something really incorrect because people who non-university graduates are educated too because they have been so much experienced that can actually make them be more greater than people who university graduates. And the opposite team also mentioned about people who are non-university graduates can create a business or something like that. Like they mentioned warung or warung rumah makan, etc. Why the company, about why they are not just go to create a business, we believe and we think that it's something not really important. Why? Because why not the company can just hire the people who are non-university to increase human life, because all of us know it's something good for the life and also can increase human level. No, thank you. And actually, the opposite team didn't give us a really clearly example about people who university graduate become greater than people who are not university graduates. So, for all those reasons, we believe that people who are non-university graduate can become more greater than people who are university graduate. And all of humans have the same opportunities to have a job. And for all those reasons, very proud to propose. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Second speaker. Now I would welcome the second opportunity speaker to introduce the speaker.
I think unemployment is symmetrical in two sides, right? The problem is not that the government doesn't want to employ these people who do not go to the university, but the problem is that there is a lack of job fields, right, in status quo. It is not the fault of the government. But secondly, university graduate is of course better than non-university graduate because they're taught about some specific skill that is not taught in high school, for example, in SMA or SMP. But yeah, two burden that they never explain, right? Firstly, they never explain why is it sufficient, right? Why SMA degree is sufficient for you to get a job in engineering, for example. But secondly, they never explain to you why education is inaccessible in status quo. I'll explain to you why it is accessible in my extension. But first, independent rebuttal then. They told you that people need opportunity. I think that is untrue, right? The people who deserve to get the opportunity is the one who actually try, who actually go to work, and who actually study. But secondly, even if, yeah, people need opportunity, we flip this metric by we say that we actually give them more opportunity simply because there's more incentive from government to now create more scholarship or more education program for these people. I'll explain it even more in my extension too. But first clash then about the urgency. We told you that education is an important metric, right? Going to college is important because high school only teaches you general education. But secondly, college also teaches you something in depth, right? It means that these people will eventually have had human resources because they understand their interests even better. But thirdly, some fields actually require you to have more in-depth knowledge about something. For example, mechanical engineering. You need to know how to do those wires, for example. It's not taught to you in SMA or SMP. But fourthly, these people who go to university is actually more vulnerable because they waste their money, they waste their time, they waste their energy in the university. Why is it actually justifiable for them to not get an employment whatsoever? What do they respond to you with? 2 points. I think firstly, they told you that some people have potential that has never been explored by. But I have two problems with this. Firstly, it is not explained on why these people have potential when they're lazy at home, when they do not want to go to university, for example, right? But secondly, it is still an exclusive because we told you we have actually better metric to measure their potential, right? Because if you get into university or when you graduate with a degree, it means that you have quote-unquote better understanding of something, yeah? So actually you have better potential on our side. But secondly, they also respond to you by saying that, yeah, you can actually get skills from the work and you can explore your talent in the future. But it is untrue. I'll explain to you with an analogy. Here's the analogy of that, right? You need to have wood and metal, for example, to create a pickaxe, right? But you use that to create more wood and pickaxe. Or you can buy that wood and metal to create more pickaxe, right? Proposition wants them to suddenly have a pickaxe from I don't know where, right? And they want them to mine something with it, right? See the problem? You do not have the necessary material or the necessary skill to get that pickaxe. You do not have the skill to do the work. How can you do it? How can you get the skill? And yeah, it is just not possible. Even if they can do it, if in status quo people can do that, it means that no one will need education. You just go to work and learn it from your work, right? So we win this clash by two reasons. Firstly, there's no in-depth explanation about their argument, and secondly, we neutralize all their argument in the best case. The weighing here should be how we actually get better skill, because on our side we have college degree, for example. But second clash about the long-term impact, which we actually win because they never explain to you what happens then after you get that talent then, right? Will you do it for more work or other work or something that has never been explained? So yeah, we actually win this second clash, but I'll still explain it. Firstly, we told you that company wants more people with better degree because they want more innovation, right? When you actually have people with more human resources who dream higher to get better jobs, it means that there are going to be a lot of better people in there on our side, right? The comparison is that people with university degree will not get employed on a proposition side simply because company is actually profit-oriented, right? They want to get reward from government from employing the people who doesn't have university degree. So yeah, people with university degree will not get employed. But secondly, we told you also on the productivity. I'll actually extend this a little bit. The problem in status quo that it takes a long time for someone to get into a company, right? Even if you have the necessary knowledge in status quo, right? You have to work for 1 month where you need to do the test, for example. You need to familiarize yourself with the company's environment, right? What happens then in proposition side? I think two scenarios. Firstly, these people do not have education. It means that it's going to take a longer time for them to familiarize with the environment, for example, right? They need to learn to how to use the tech, for example. It looks like them having to relearn how to use all those things all over again. But secondly, even if they want to say that high school will now teach you better education, for example, right? Yeah, but the problem is that it is unlikely to happen because it takes a lot of resources to teach these people how to use mechanical engineering, for example, in high school, right? Secondly, even if it is possible, it's going to take a lot more money. It means that now high school tuition is going to cost like college tuition. So yeah, it's going to lead these people to even more debt, for example, right? But I'm going to take one POI. Okay. Yeah, but moving on to my first extension then, on the individual level, on the people who have university degree and who doesn't have university degree. I think firstly that, first layer on the people who do not have a university degree, right? Firstly, I think that when they get into the job market, even if what they say is going their best way, right? Even if these people get into the job, I think that firstly, they'll have less pay. This is likely for two reasons. I think firstly, when you get hired, you do not have any university degree, these people, the company itself will tell you to say that, oh yeah, you have to appreciate me because now I hire you even if you do not have any university degree. And secondly, the society will also have the same perspective, right? Because they see that, oh yeah, this person doesn't have anything to offer to the company, but the company actually still hired this person, right? So yeah, you need to appreciate it. But thirdly, and the society also is already disappointed, for example, to the government because, yeah, my kid go to university, but he's not employed just because the government, because the company want to get more rewards from the government from hiring the non-university graduates, for example. The impact here is two things. Firstly, these people are going to work even harder without more pay, and they might get even less pay if they work harder, simply because there's no check and balance from the society, for example, right? Because the only one that prevents you from getting overworked from your company, for example, is the society itself when they do riots, for example, right? But now they're not doing that because they think that, oh yeah, you need to appreciate the company. But yeah, second layer on the university graduate, right? Firstly, I think they'll waste their money, all their energy, like what I've told you before. The comparison is very clear here, right? In proposition side, there's not going to be any incentive for them to study. There's not going to be any scholarship. But on our side, there's going to be a lot more incentive. Why so? I think firstly, when the government actually is the one incentivizing you to hire the people with university degree, they want to create more people with university degree. It means that this government will create more scholarship program or program for the underprivileged people to study even better. The weighing here should be on the impact, right? Proposition told you that you want to get more pay, right? You want people to have a job. You want people to be able to sustain themselves, but you actually give them little pay. Comparatively, we help all the actors. The people with no degree can have scholarship, and the people with degree can get even better job. For fair pay, vote for opposition side.
The opposing team has started a statement where they said that people who are graduated had more potential to become employee rather than ungraduated people. However, like my team said, that people who are graduated from SMK also have potential. So I don't think that people who are ungraduated don't have that opportunities to become a worker because they have. The opposing team also mentioned that people who are not at university are people who are uneducated. They also mentioned that people who are non-university are people who are uneducated. Why they are not just go to create a business? I think that something not really important because etc. Why the company can just hire the people who are non-university to increase human life because all of it's something, etc., something good for the life and also the transition, and no thank you, that increase because the people who are non-university graduate, are educated, and have a possibility to become a greater people who are university graduates. Did you say that people who are deserve the opportunity are the people who are try? In fact, the non-university also try too. They mentioned that people who non-university are uneducated again, but the fact that we are actually told you that when people who are not non-graduated need to have a lot of sources, not just come from the university, but actually there is a lot of things that can be a sources for non-university people. No, thank you. In conclusion, we as the proposition team agreed that the people who are non-graduate also had abilities to become a worker based on the reasons that we are just said that we are work of. Thank you.
Check. Their whole case relies on the statement that non-university graduate students also have potential, right? But what is the potential, right? What is it that non-graduate students have, but the graduate students don't have? We don't really get this point, right? But let's clarify a point that they have mentioned before. They mentioned on how they want to incentivize employers to employ non-university graduates that can improve innovation, right? But there's no analysis on how this can happen. Where is the correlation between how employing non-university graduates can possibly give more innovation under your side of the house? We need more analysis, layers of analysis, right? But then let's rebut their case about how they want to minimize unemployment. We say that their case revolves heavily around unemployment, when this debate's main focus is not only about unemployment, but we also need to cater about other things such as the actor's interest, etc., which I'll be integrating in my class later on. So their case is inexclusive, right? Because it can happen because of a lot of other reasons. Employment can happen because of maybe pandemic, back in COVID, for example, or government regulations, etc. At the very least, you only incentivize employers to employ non-university graduates. You only make the university graduates have even less chances to have work to begin with. How is that justified, right? But then moving on to my first clash regarding the urgency then, we see more urgency to hire university graduates because of a few reasons. Firstly, they are likely to be more experienced than the non-university graduate students, right? This can happen because in university, they learn and they enhance their skills in a specific field as their foundation to actually work in the first place. You don't really get this under their side of the house, since they will only hire people they can hire people even when they are only high school graduates, right? And this is important because foundation of skills is the prerequisite is exclusive on our side, because under their side, they hire more non-university graduates, right? Which means that they're probably going to hire more high school graduates. So the burden for government side becomes, how can they prove that non-university graduates can perform as well as the university graduates in the work fields once they get employed, right? Even if, at best, the non-university graduates can have experiences, we say that it will be less likely to be as diverse as the experiences that you get after you graduate from university. Under their side, we say that they still have to be really, really good at a specific field if they want to become employed. The competition will still bring pressure to the actors under your side of the house for the non-university graduate students, right? So 3 points of harm under their side of the house. Firstly, the pressure is going to be strengthened because of the competition with the university graduates, right? Imagine when you're a high school graduate and you become employed in a certain office, for example, you have to compete with the university graduates. If you want to, for example, climb the corporate ladder, it will be less likely for you to be easy under their side of the house. But then second harm, there will be also backlash from university graduates and from society in general when you incentivize employers to actually employ the non-university graduates. Because, for example, you imagine someone becomes a teacher without having any university degree. How is that going to be do any good, right? Of course, the university graduates, of course, society will backlash towards that teacher. That will be detrimental towards the mental health. This brings me to my third impact regarding the mental health for the non-university graduates when they become employed. They only care about the short-term benefit, which is they get employed at best, but in the long run, their mental health will be detrimental, right? But then, moving on to the actor's interest then, 3 nuances. Firstly, for the company employers, they want quality human resources. This is their main interest in the company, right? We fulfill this by maintaining that high standard that they have mentioned. So the incentive for employers to employ unique graduates still stands because they want their company to progress. I don't think their side have catered to this interest for the employers, right? But then secondly, for the non-university graduates, okay, if their interest is to get employed, we say that it's not exclusive, right? Our first speaker have mentioned that people under our side can also get employed, for example, in local businesses, right? And also the amount of people who are not university graduates is getting lesser and lesser because we have more scholarships, which I will elaborate later on in my comparison. But then third, regarding the university graduate students, when you incentivize employers to employ non-university graduates, how can you justify, how can you defend the people who spend their time, their money, and energy losing to people who are not university graduates? They don't get employed just because they hire more non-university graduates, right? This poses it to you that university graduates are more vulnerable in this debate, and we need to cater to them. We believe on how, under our side, we can cater to this actors' interest better. But then, moving on to the idea regarding progressivity, the harms under their side, when they incentivize employers to employ non-university graduates, is that they kill the progressivity of people, they kill the progressivity in the society, right? At best, they can minimize unemployment in the short term, but this comes at a very expensive price of trading it with our long-term progressivity. How is this justified? So it's only going to be a 1 step forward, 3 steps back under their side of the house. They mentioned that companies have high standards, right? A few responses then. Firstly, exactly, companies have high standards. It's reasonable for companies to have high standards, right? To have a high standard because they want to grow their company, they want to progress, they want to develop, they want to get as many profits as possible, they want to maximize that. But I don't think under your side you can actually manifest this benefit, right? Because under their side, instead of meeting this standard, they lower down their standards to non-university graduates. This is harmful because when the standards goes down by incentivizing employers to employ non-university graduates, what happens is that, firstly, companies cannot maximize their growth because their human resources are likely to be much more limited because they hire non-university graduates that have less experiences than the university graduates. But then also, they kill the motivation for people to pursue education because when they see on how employers can now employ you with a high school graduate, I think that people will have less incentives to actually go pursue education in university when in reality education is very important for you to even grow as a human being, as an individual, right? And progressivity is important because it's the prerequisite to growth and development. Are there any POIs? 3, 2, 1. Okay, the best case under their side is that they can minimize unemployment for non-university graduates, right? But they cannot minimize the unemployment for the university graduates. We solve this better because we don't restrict the non-university graduates from getting jobs, and we also encourage employers to hire people with university degrees. So under our side, the best case is that we give more leverage for non-university graduates through government giving more scholarships, just like how our previous speakers have already mentioned. So even if under their side, they also want to say they have scholarships, we say that it is less likely to happen. It is less likely that their scholarships will be as prevalent, will be as accessible as under our side, because when the government does not incentivize employers to hire university graduates, well, that means that they also have less incentive from the government to give scholarships for people, right? And so their best case still falls on the ground lower than our worst case. For all these reasons, negate.
Notice for a proposition case to run, until this end of this debate, they still owe you two explanations. A, what is the exclusive traits and skill that non-graduate student, non-graduate student university don't have, right? This is important because if they don't explain this, all their case falls in exclusive when we prove to you that graduate students also have those type of skill that non-graduate students have on their side of the house. But then secondly, let's give them another chance to engage towards this. If they don't give to you any explanation on the first point, the other explanation that they owe to you is why is college that inaccessible in the status quo? We need this analysis because if it is already so accessible, like what opposition posited to you since first speaker, then there's no other reason for you not to prefer graduate student, especially when we point out the skills that graduate students exclusively have, which include A, more on-site practices, which mean they're more adapted to how the working environment, for example. But then secondly, the environment that exists in college forces you to perform better, like maybe harder tasks, like maybe there's a docent that is more stricter, for example. But then lastly, they also have more technical knowledge. For example, if they go to engineer college, then they're going to have, how to handle those wires, like what Sam said. So on top of my speech, I've already tackled down the basic foundation in which all their case runs. So let's further explain why we win this debate in a landslide. The biggest case they brought to you from side proposition is that unemployability, on how non-graduate students would not have any other chances in our side of the house. But firstly, the biggest question is, what is the potential? What is the skill? And why are these people so vulnerable in their side? Because we have told you, if we already give scholarship that is already so accessible in the status quo, and how we prove to you that scholarship will even get more accessible in our side, there is still people that who don't want to go to university. It means that there are probably people who are lazy, or maybe these people don't want to make, maybe they just want to make their own startup, for example. So they're not really vulnerable under their side. But then secondly, furthermore, we told you that employability is not even exclusive in this debate, because it's contingent on factors like maybe COVID, which result into a mass unemployment, mass PHK in Indonesia, for example. Or secondly, small job spaces. Thirdly, government regulation. Lastly, maybe there's more automated industry in these progressive status quo. So this posit that employability is not exclusive, they need to prove to you why they can solve this issue of employability if that's the burden that they want to take in this debate. But then lastly, on vulnerability, we tell you that even if we want to argue at the very best case scenario that only graduate students will get employed under our side of the house, and at worst non-employed students and non-graduate students don't get employed, I think that first it is fine because these people are so vulnerable. They have invested so many their time, they've invested so many money, they have basically that. But secondly, they can only opt into that small scope of career path under our side of the house, simply because if you graduate with a medical degree, for example, you probably cannot get accepted into other sectors that don't include surgeries and medication. You can probably only be a doctor, you can probably only be a surgeon, you can only probably be a pharmacist under our side of the house. So they're so vulnerable under our side of the house, we need to ensure that their career path is clearer. But lastly, let's tell you what we have brought under this debate, because I think that most of their cases are just so repetitive and contingent on these previous point that I've rebutted completely. Firstly, we told you that our case about urgency of education and why graduates are so much better is unengaged from their side. Secondly, we also told you that education become more accessible, and we have told you that this is important because even if our case falls, the idea about education becoming more accessible is a benefit that both sides wants in terms of how we give more chances to underprivileged community, in terms of how we give a scholarship towards people that cannot afford school. So yeah, that in general is just independent from any sort of our cases. But then lastly, not thirdly actually, our long-term impact was also not engaged. What are those? First, this includes skilled human resources. Secondly, less segregation from the society. And then lastly, people can dream higher and they can get into more technical field, which means you get less development in their side of the house, you get more development in our side of the house, when people can dream about being astronaut, because that you require some sort of technicality when you get into those sector of job. But then lastly, my O2 case about individual livelihood is also really important in this debate. Because first, we told you that company can easily impose lower wages towards people in their side of the house, because this company can simply say, like, if you don't have a high standard, if you don't have these skills, then yeah, we probably will only give you, small amount of money. So it's kind of fair, right? It kills their vulnerable actor in their side of the house. Comparatively, in opposition, sure, these people are so stressed because they go to, a university, they're forced with so many tasks, but I think at the end of the day, the trade-off is worth it, and for all those reasons, negate.
So move to the next round, or the final round on this debate process. We will try to define you guys and tell you guys what is the thing that we feel that inaccurate from the position team. So the first one is, they said that mental is a major and not very necessary for employees. But for us, mental is the most important things for people who want to get jobs, because if they don't have a very, very well-prepared mental, but only focus on their knowledge prepared, it will not run good. For example, if they already get a well-prepared knowledge, but if their mentality not good, then they will get a more stress, because it will easily, because work is not only with the knowledge, but also with the responsibilities of their life. And with the mental to then they can gain or do their work more better, and they can avoid people to build a bad responsibilities employers in the company. The next point is, they more focusing on academical based more than the other, or more than the other, or rather than non-academical based. We as a government team in the first speaker has already told you guys that to get a job, or non-graduated peoples is also has a very many talent to get a jobs and employers. And we already told you and mentioned you guys about SMK and the local workforce that are not only going to have a standard with the standard of academical based, but also will explore the talent. The second one, I really want to say that maybe we can deny that knowledge and skill is the most important thing. But if people already had a well-prepared knowledge but without a skill, then it will be a potential to people to using the knowledge without a very well-prepared skill. They also explain, and they can get an example, more focusing on the engineering, which is always connected with academic base, like what I already said before, that people, we can say it, or just like step the standard to get a jobs with academic based. Beside of that, they also mentioned that we didn't give example that what people who not non-university have, but the university graduate, but the university graduate didn't have. And we already told you that all people have different ability, but actually have the same opportunities. But the opposite system keeps saying that people who have opportunities are people who are try. We believe that this is something inaccurate. And our second speaker, I'll also mention an example like Mrs. Puji Arstuti, but actually the opposite system didn't give you a clear example again that we did. They just mentioned some profession without the really, really clear example or a real person. And how the opposite system is just team, it just can justify that the people who are non-university graduate had a small source than university graduate. If they didn't explain to you, and they didn't explain to you clearly why they can just justify this without any actual example and didn't based on facts. And this is from all of the reason we believe that we win the debate. Thank you.